Dracula's just creeping on these two women. Mina and Maria are trying to like just go do their own thing, but this creepy fucker in a top hat is just like hovering over them. You know how like when you're hanging out with your friends and there's always that one extra friend that doesn't know everybody, but they try to join in on the conversation? That's kind of like what Dracula's doing. Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I'm your host, Brian Coddington, and I'm actually not joined by my fellow co-host, John Woolscroft. It is just me this week, and this is actually a first, as I am rocking this episode solo. So yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm not sure if this is going to be a short episode, a long episode, who knows? But this week, I have a very fun breakdown of a movie that I honestly, I kid you not, folks, you are listening to this, I've never walked away from a movie, you know, either infuriated or bored. And with this movie, I had both. And that is, of course, we're talking about 2026's Dracula, also known as 2025's Dracula, A Love Tale. The Luc Besson, I'm going to call it right out of the gate, Bram Stoker's Dracula ripoff. Okay. That might feel a bit controversial, but I have a feeling that this episode, at the end of this episode, you're going to probably be saying like, wow, Brian really hates this movie, but I don't. I hate the experience of watching it. First off, if you haven't done so already, before I even get to our review, do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. If you're watching us here on YouTube. Also, if you want to follow us on your favorite podcast app of choice, go to cinemapsychoshow.com/follow and follow us there so you never miss an episode. With that said, let me get into the synopsis for Dracula. When a 15th century prince denounces God after the loss of his wife, he inherits an eternal curse. He becomes Dracula. Condemned to wander the centuries, he defies fate and death, guided by a single hope to be reunited with his lost love. The film is directed and written by Luc Besson. You might know him as the mind behind movies like The Fifth Element, The Messenger, The Story of Joan of Arc, and many, many other great films like The Professional, Leon the Professional, and a number of other films from the 90s that really, really were good. And it stars Caleb Landry Jones, Christoph Waltz, and Zoe Blue. I hope I'm pronouncing that last name right. It's Blue. So I gotta be honest with you. I heard about this movie last year because guess what? Even though it now is released February 6th, I believe it's out this week. So even though it's coming out February 6th, this movie is not brand new. It's actually been out for a while. So much so that if you walk down the right back alley in the internet, you will probably stumble across this film. Okay, because this movie was released in France in July of 2025. So it's not brand new. It's just brand new to American audiences because this was released in France. So why might you say, you know, dear listener, why does Brian have a problem with this film? It's a Dracula movie. Well, if you go to Brian's back catalog of episodes, you notice that I tend to like vampire films. You know, we had on our good friend Jordan the Grey Witch, talk about Nosferatu. We've talked about Sinners. We've done multiple episodes on Dracula films and vampire films. Why would this one be a problem? Oh, well, I'm going to break down exactly why I have a problem with this film. First off, let's talk a little bit about the production of this movie. In doing research for it, you realize that Luc Besson actually didn't want to make this Dracula movie for the sake of making a Dracula movie. He made it because he just wanted to work with Caleb Landry Jones, which is fine, but I think that is one of the reasons why this movie is not as good as it is. When you're not rooted in the mythology of Dracula, the mythology of vampires, and you're not, really care about that, it shows. And it shows to me more so in the quotes that he had in talking about this movie. So he said, and he admitted in an interview, he said, quote, "I'm not a fan of horror movies nor of Dracula." He also stated that he wanted to make a tragic romantic love story rather than a horror film, even though he kept some horror aspects. What interested him the most about the story was the man tries for 400 years to find the love of his life. Here's the thing, though. That is Dracula. Like, this isn't new territory. This is actually pretty much the common territory when it comes to Dracula stories, at least within the past, I'd say 30 or 40 years. There's many versions of the Dracula where the romantic side of Dracula is the focus. Okay. And it reads to me more that Luc Besson did not care about any of this when you actually look at another quote that he had about this very moment. So he actually said, "There's a romantic side in Bram Stoker's book that hasn't been explored that much. It's a love story about a man who waits for 400 years for the reincarnation of his wife. That's the true heart of the story, waiting for eternity for the return of his love." He's basically saying that it's never been explored. That's bullshit. Okay? I'm sorry. That is absolute 100% bullshit. You don't even have to go back that far. Okay? 1992, Bram Stoker's Dracula. That movie is all about Dracula finding his lost love after hundreds of years. Okay? It's literally the main focus. The marketing for that movie was love never dies. Okay? This is it, the line, "I've crossed oceans of time to find you." What do you think that is? Saying it's never been explored? Who the fuck do you think you are? It has been explored over and over and over again. This isn't new. Not new territory. Okay? So that right there shows me how ignorant this filmmaker was in tackling the subject matter. If you do not care about the character, if you do not care about the story, if you're not even invested to even understand that, hey, there are other Dracula versions that have come out prior, and oh yeah, they might actually speak to the same exact things you're doing, then it shows to me when we then watch Dracula, A Love Tale, why it feels more like a parody film than anything. So yeah, I'm calling it right out. Dracula, A Love Tale is a parody film. And I have a feeling people are going to be angry at me about that one, especially because later when we get to the Letterboxd reviews, I was kind of surprised at the fact that a good chunk of the reviews were positive, because I'm like, what the hell are we talking about here? This doesn't feel, at least to me, like a positive film. It feels like a negative film. But hey, what the hell do I know? So with that said, let me get into a little bit of the story of this. And I'm going to try to go through this as much as I can. Let me be honest with you. I watched this movie and I kid you not, falling asleep through half of it because it was so boring at times. This movie's like 2 hours long, but it feels like a 3-hour long movie. It opens up with Vlad, played by Caleb Landry Jones, who I have nothing against him at all. Like, I liked him in X-Men First Class as Banshee. I thought he was great in that. I haven't seen him in a lot of other things. I've been told that he's really good in other films. I just haven't seen them. So I don't have much to go off of. But he opens up with basically this montage sequence of Vlad having sexy times with his wife, Elisabetta. It's a little weird. It's just a little weird. Okay. It's honestly, it borders on the level of unhealthy obsession. And then he gets upset at the fact that he has to do battle instead of fool around with his wife, which, okay, I get that, but you're also like the Prince of Wallachia. Shouldn't you like, don't you have other things you need to do? Like, I get it. You don't want to do anything like ruling over your lands. You'd rather just fool around with your wife. I understand that, but you've been doing that for like a week at this point. It moves to very familiar territory. Vlad goes into battle. Before he leaves, he, basically has a moment with the local priest in his castle and says, you better protect my wife while I'm gone. And sure enough, we know exactly what's going to happen. So the difference really is in how Elisabetta dies. That's where the changes start to occur. So one, he wins his battle. Obviously, he impales a bunch of Turks with their heads on spikes. Of course, doesn't look as visually imposing as the Coppola version, although it does borrow a lot from it, like the blood red sky and the silhouettes. Again, very similar to Coppola's version. Where it starts to differ is that while Elisabetta is basically, going to safer quarters while Vlad is fighting the battle, Turk assassins basically corner her and in a snowy area, and basically through Vlad's own, I don't say accidental battling or whatever, he just accidentally kills her. He's trying to kill one of the Turk assassins, and he throws his sword, and it stabs Elisabetta as well as the assassin. So he's really at fault. So you just keep that in mind. He's at fault. It's not anyone, like it's not like in the original Dracula where, Elisabetta commits suicide and she does it because she thinks that Dracula's dead. That leaves it open so that Dracula can blame God and blame the church, and especially once the main priest who's played in that film by Anthony Hopkins says she's damned. Like, that's a moment where it's the straw that broke the camel's back. There's none of that here. It's never really acknowledged in this film that she died because of Dracula. Like, physically it was him. Like, I know he was trying to save her, but he accidentally killed her. Okay. So then it leads into a moment that we're all familiar with, and it borrows so much. This sequence borrows so much from Coppola's version. It's not even funny. Where, Vlad says, okay, fine, I'm going to, I curse God, blah, blah, blah. And I guess in this version, God curses him with vampirism. And we even get like the common tropes of like the little like cross statue, bleeding blood eyes, which again is just pulled directly from a better film. And it's just not done well. It just really is not done well. At that point, we flash forward to the 1890s. And this time, instead of it being London, we are, of course, in Paris. Makes sense. It's a Luc Besson French film. I'm fine with that. I actually don't mind that this moves to Paris rather than instead of London. Because for me, Luc Besson is a French director. I expect he's going to add that flair to it because that's where he's coming from. And it picks up with a vampire hunting priest played by Christoph Waltz, who is investigating a woman named Maria, and he goes to a sanitarium because this woman apparently is a well-to-do woman who kind of lost her shit and went insane during her wedding day. Upon his investigation, he finds that she is in fact a vampire infected by Dracula. Now, it's worth mentioning that Christoph Waltz in this is, I hate to say it, the man's phoning it in. He is absolutely doing his Dr. King Schultz impression, but Dr. King Schultz is a vampire hunter. It's okay, but I don't, I'm not, blown away by his performance like I've seen in other films. I'd even say that his performance in Horrible Bosses 2 was probably better than this because there was more to it than that. And even though that movie was not that great, it still was better. So we cut now from this moment to now the classic Jonathan Harker meeting Dracula scene. And this again is pulling almost verbatim from Bram Stoker's Dracula, the 1992 version by Francis Ford Coppola. Like, even the way that Jonathan Harker looks is similar to Keanu Reeves to some degree. He still looks a little goofy. Dracula's appearance in this with the goofy over the top hair and the, very old man makeup that makes his face look sunken in and make it look like a rotten prune. It's all very similar to that movie, that it's hard to look at it and not see this as a parody film. That's the problem. But it does differ when we start to move to the moment where Jonathan Harker actually discovers that Dracula is sleeping in his coffin. And it's important to note that throughout all of these scenes, there are weird tonal shifts that occur where we move from something that is more horror-based to something that is, I would say, comedic. And there is an artful way to do that, and in this film, they don't. Like, there is a moment where Jonathan Harker in this film opens the coffin, and you just see Dracula sleeping there. And he, instead of like doing what we've seen in other films, which, a moment of terror, Jonathan Harker shoots back and he rises, we get just a line from Dracula, and he says, "I told you you should have not have wandered." Like, it's done in a tongue-in-cheek way that I don't think serves this movie really well, especially if this movie is supposed to be marketed as a romantic gothic horror movie. Okay? So the movie starts to divulge at this point because we get introduced to Dracula's bizarro, weird CGI gargoyles that are not very good. Like they're CGI circa 2000. Like, that's what these gargoyles look like. And these gargoyles are like Dracula's minions, and they do his bidding. And so upon Jonathan Harker opening up the coffin, they chain him up. Dracula says, "Hey, I'm going to drink your blood," and is able, Harker's able to convince him to tell his story. And this is where we do change a little bit from what we've seen previously. Instead, we get, what I don't know how to describe it, just a clip show of Dracula's life from the moment Elisabetta dies to now. Like, that's what it kind of is, a clip show. So here's what is in this clip show of flashbacks. One, we see that Dracula, immediately after her death, mourns her. It's never really explained so much about why all of a sudden he has vampirism, like why he's a vampire. None of that is ever really explained. It's more or less just like, he can't die. But he encounters the Black Death. He starts to, obviously not be affected by any of that. And this is where we start to get some really like goofy, over the top moments. There's a sequence where after he encounters the Black Death, he decides he wants to die, but he realizes that he can't die. And we see this in the most bizarro fucking way. It almost feels like a cartoon, where he starts jumping off his castle like 50 times and landing in the snow. And we're not talking about a tiny jump. We're talking about something that's like he's jumping out of a building, and he keeps falling to his death, but he's not dying. And what's interesting about this is he keeps leaping back and doing this over and over and over again, realizing, oh yeah, I can't die. But it's just not at all serious. And the best part is like, he's still getting injured. Like, that's the crazy thing about it. He's still getting injured. It's not like in other Dracula movies where if he cut himself or anything like that, he'd immediately heal. He's literally limping back up to then jump out of the window again. Next, he decides that he's going to, in his time, try to find Elisabetta, because in his head, she was a pure soul and she must be reincarnated. Okay. How do you know that? Like, there's nothing ever that's explained for that. You could say, well, Brian, that reincarnation happens in the book. Not really. That's never really put in there. Even the Coppola film, it's, of course, we put as the audience two and two together that this person is reincarnated, but it's never explicitly said. And there's never a plot of Dracula trying to find this person over 400 years. It's more like they mourn that person for 400 years and they stumble upon that. That's not really the case here. So because Dracula has it in his head that, oh yes, my wife is going to be reincarnated, he decides he's going to try to search her out. And this right here, folks, this was a moment where I literally was watching the film and I was going, what the fuck is going on? Like, this is a moment where the movie takes, I don't want to say a hard U-turn, but it just takes a detour into what the fuck's Phil, okay? And that is a moment that Dracula goes into the sex perfume business. Yeah, I'm not kidding. I'm really not kidding. So somehow, okay, this is clearly like a Luc Besson thing. Somehow he thinks that to be able to find his dead wife who's reincarnated, he needs to find a way to attract women to him. So if he devises a perfume that immediately makes women sexual creatures the minute he puts it on him, that will somehow get the reincarnated version of Elisabetta to him. That's not how science works. It makes so much bizarro. It doesn't make any fucking sense. Okay, it just doesn't make any fucking sense. So what he does is he spends like the next, I don't know, 300 years basically, going from court to court throughout Europe, and basically hooking up with everyone that he meets because of his sex perfume. And we get this sequence in a dance number that I didn't think was really necessary. I was like, why is this here? It took me completely out of the fucking movie. And I was just like, why? Just why? And you can say like, well, Brian, it's, there's movies that have other good. I don't care. It doesn't belong in Dracula. I don't care. And this whole thing culminates with Dracula losing his shit in Versailles. So he goes to Versailles and he realizes, like, he thinks that he's finally found his dead wife reincarnated, and he discovers, oh, it's not. And she kind of humiliates him in front of the entire party. And he just kind of loses his shit, realizes, oh God, I've wasted 300 years of my life trying to find this person, and they're not there. So he kind of loses it, and he bites like 20 people in the party and infects them with vampirism. And Maria was one of them, his vampire like minion. So what he ends up doing is sending these people out to try to find Elisabetta, and of course they come up with nothing. Okay, so then he spends the next 100 or so years just kind of sitting by himself with his gargoyles just to kind of keep him company. And this is a moment in the movie where Harker kind of plays on Dracula's like love sickness and says, oh, well, you've got to let me go because obviously I'm engaged to be married. And, this intrigues Dracula to the point where he looks at his locket and sees, oh yeah, it's the reincarnated version of my dead wife. So he spares him, yes, but says he's going to steal his wife and make her his. Now, I mentioned that Dracula is an old man. Okay. And in the Coppola version, we never actually see him turn into a young man. It's always just like when he drinks blood that like replenishes him, and that's pretty much it. So in this version, they have a very interesting scene in which the way that Dracula is able to become young again is that I kid you not when I tell you this, folks, he goes to a convent, puts on some of his sex perfume, and basically, I'm assuming, drains all of the nuns in the nunnery. Like, I'm not making this up. Like, it's kind of on full display. Like, these nuns are all into him. I'm assuming he drains them, and of course, because he's Dracula, he just, has sex with them too. It's fucking weird. I'm not making this up. At this point, we're cutting back to the sanitarium, and Maria escapes the sanitarium with Dracula's help and meets up with Mina to introduce her to Dracula. It's important to note that Maria basically is a stand-in for Lucy at this point. But she's kind of like, I'd say she's like Lucy, but at an 11, whereas Lucy was just kind of the antithesis of the spoiled rich girl who lives in a Victorian society and is outside the bounds of Victoria, like, ideals. They took that and said, okay, how can we take that and turn it to an 11 and make it over the top and ridiculous? Because Maria is very much that. I don't have anything against the actress. It's just she's kind of all over the place. So she escapes. They go on a fun, I think I wrote down here, they go on a fun-filled evening through Paris, hanging out at freak shows, shooting guns, and watching fireworks. Okay? Like, and all the while, like, Dracula's just creeping on these two women because he's, like, hanging out with them, but then at the same time, he's not hanging out with them. And, like, Mina and Maria are trying to, like, just go do their own thing, but this creepy fucker in a top hat is just, like, hovering over them and trying to interject themselves. You know how, like, when you're hanging out with your friends and, like, there's always that one extra friend that doesn't know everybody, but they try because they think they're confident enough to join in on the conversation? That's kind of like what Dracula's doing. He's trying to offer himself up because really he's got no game at all. And he's just trying to creep in on Mina at all points. When Mina is actually returning home from their fun-filled evening, she actually finds that Harker and the priest are all at Mina's house, and they reveal the truth about Dracula. They reveal that, hey, this guy is actually a vampire, and he's trying to steal you. And yeah, Mina kind of takes it pretty well. She doesn't exactly believe them and thinks, oh yeah, he was a total gentleman. She's just met this guy literally 10 minutes ago, and she doesn't want to believe that he could potentially be a vampire. So when Mina goes to her room, and, you know, she encounters Dracula in her room, and yeah, I think I wrote down here that he basically, like, throws away his sex perfume because Mina's convinced that he used his perfume on her. But Dracula, being a gentleman, keep in mind everything I said before, says, oh, I would never use that on you, you know, because he's obsessed with her. But in throwing away the perfume, you know, Mina basically has this weird, I'd say, personality change that occurs. Like, it's really strange the way that they wrote this. So, like, Mina is clearly her own person. Yeah, she probably is reincarnated, but they went and made it where, like, her whole personality, like, as Elizabeta, like, comes back and overflows and takes over who Mina is. Like, it's really written in a very strange way where she just, like, a light bulb, like, turns on and suddenly she's Elizabeta and she loves Dracula for no reason. Like, there's nothing there. You know, of course, Dracula throwing the perfume away kind of clues in everyone that, oh yeah, he's here. They bust in and they've left. Okay. The final part of this movie has Dracula and Mina traveling back to his home in Transylvania. And this is where it gets a little different. And I'm just like, how? But yeah, Harker and the priests, they actually get a fucking army. Like, they get whoever the army is, like if it's a French army or whoever, they get an army to actually go and lay siege to Dracula's fucking house. Like, this isn't like, oh, a handful of hunters with a knife and a gun and here, and we're going to travel on them. No, they literally go in with a fucking army and are bombarding his house with, like, cannon fire. Of course, while this is all happening, you know, Dracula bites Mina and is going to turn her and all that fun stuff. It ends with the priest, played by Christoph Waltz, basically saying like he's not there to really kill Dracula. He is there to save him, because he wants, him to repent before God and not condemn Mina to eternal damnation. So Dracula having his aha moment and saying, yeah, I probably shouldn't do that. He allows himself to get staked by the priest. And at this point, he does disintegrate and turn to dust after declaring his love for Mina. And we get this really weird moment. Like, there's a lot of weird moments in this movie, but there's a weird moment where like Jonathan Harker comes in and sees that his fiancée Mina is like holding and coveting the ashes of Dracula in her hand. And you just got to feel bad for the guy. Like, he just turns around and is like, okay, that's cool. You're just into this guy who tried to kill me. And yeah, now you're. I think the marriage is off. Just saying, probably it's off. And yeah, that's fucking Dracula. If I spoiled it for you, I'm sorry, but the movie's fucking terrible. Let me go through some of the different characters in this movie. One, Dracula, played by Caleb Landry Jones. I don't know. I don't have a problem with him. Like, a lot of people, like I've seen online, have posted and said like, oh, they thought he did a great job. Okay, like that's fine. Like, you did an okay job in a movie that really didn't need to be made. Like, that's the way I look at it. Are there worse versions? Yeah. But then at the same token, like, I look at his performance and he did have, by far, I would call it the goofiest fucking laugh I've ever heard any Dracula, utter. Like, I kid you not, like, there's a moment where he's torturing Harker, like, right at the beginning, and he's, like, laughing at one of his jokes, and he has this very bizarre laugh that I'm just going, this doesn't read to me like a sinister laugh. Like, you could point to Gary Oldman's laugh in Bram Stoker's Dracula 1992. That is a sinister laugh. It's one that we all know. And it brings chills, honestly, to those of us who experienced that film when a movie came out and then, maybe watched it subsequently. But it's a very sinister laugh. And that is not at all here. This is very the opposite of that. Okay, it's very goofy. Maria, I felt that she was a standout vampire bride, but as I mentioned before, she's kind of turned up to 11. And like, I know what they were trying to go for with her character, but Sadie Frost, who played Lucy in the original 1982 Bram Stoker's Dracula, did such a better job at playing this type of character than the actress who played Maria. It's nothing against them, but I really attribute it more to directing than I do to the actor. Because Sadie Frost brought, kind of a mania, but also at the same time, there were elements of, kind of living within this Victorian lifestyle, but at the same time trying to break out of it. And it was this back and forth that happened. I mean, even the sequence when she's talking about all the different suitors that she has and how they're all basically obsessed with her, and she kind of has to choose between which lifestyle does she want, and that there's so much more nuance to that than you get with this version. Mina Elisabetta, I got not much to say because, to be perfectly honest with you, even though she's the main focus of the film, she's kind of minor in terms of her performance. Her performance as Mina, not that great, in my opinion. It's all right. Elisabetta, okay. But they don't give her a whole lot to do other than just be kind of a pawn in this world that the movie gives us. Whereas at least with the other versions of Dracula that are out there, and again, I'm going to point to the Bram Stoker one, the 92 one, because that one did it well. They gave Mina things to do. They gave reasoning. Like, you had those diary entries that gave insight into her psyche. None of that is really here. Okay? It's just not. Harker, he's kind of a joke. The be as cruel for it. He's kind of a joke. I'm being honest with you. I didn't really care for him. It's not his fault. He's in a parody film, but he is. He's a parody version of Jonathan Harker. Doesn't really do much either, but he's just kind of there. The priest, Christoph Waltz, is doing his best version of Dr. King Schultz, Vampire Hunter. It's not great. It's not bad, because Christoph Waltz, in my opinion, can't do bad, but it's just lackluster. Like you could, I don't think he's phoning in his lines, but I think he's just, he realizes what kind of movie this is. Like, he totally does. He realizes that this is not a film version of Dracula where the filmmaker actually cares about Dracula and cares about the story. He gets that. At least I felt that he got that. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, does Brian just hate this movie overall? Are there anything that is positive? Yeah, I do think there are some positives here. One, I think the costumes in this and the set design were good. The problem is, and this is, again, a problem when you try to make a movie that is pulled so directly from a better source, that the better source is always going to outshine any effort you do in your version. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, I mentioned the costumes in this film were really well done. The makeup in this film was really well done. I actually, the complexity of Dracula's makeup in this, I thought was well done. The problem is that I can go look at 1992's Bram Stoker's Dracula and see a far better version of this. Okay. And so when I look at this movie, I'm always going to be comparing that to that far better version. It's the same thing that happens when you watch a parody film. Like, if you remember all of those, parody films of movies like Scary Movie, a lot of those films like the Epic Movie and Comic Book Movie, all these different parody films that are out there that are all in the vein of Scary Movie. They're not as popular anymore, but they're knockoffs of original things. They're knockoffs of better things, like the Meet the Spartans movie. That's a knockoff of 300. And this film feels like a knockoff of Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. So when I'm looking at the positive things, it's hard for me to look at those and go yeah, the makeup looks good for a knockoff version of a better film. Do you understand what I'm saying? So yeah, the music, the score, actually really good. I actually like the score in this. It's no surprise to me that the score was made by Danny Elfman. We love Danny Elfman on this podcast, always have, and he definitely brought it to this film. It's just a shame that the score is in a movie that is bad. That's the truth of it. It sucks that that's the case. But hey, paycheck's a paycheck. Now, some people might say, well, Brian, what about the argument of reinterpretation? Okay, because that's something that always comes up when we're talking about movies like Dracula or Frankenstein or whatever. There's always the argument of, well, it's the director's interpretation. I understand that. And I've actually been a proponent of filmmakers adapting and reinterpreting movies as they see fit. I don't have a problem with that. But when the filmmaker themselves goes on record and says, I, one, don't like horror movies. Two, I am going to make a Dracula movie that's about the love story, which makes no sense because, again, that's all Dracula movies there for the most part, at least within the past 30, 40 years. Okay. And that when he says, I really am not a fan of Dracula, like those three things tell me that your heart isn't in this. So when your heart and your understanding of this genre and this character isn't there, then your reinterpretation is basically bullshit. Okay? Because I can look at other properties that have reinterpreted this. For instance, I really like the BBC / Netflix Dracula that came out a couple years ago, that is a vastly different interpretation of the story, but it comes from people who at least have publicly stated like they like Dracula. You know what I mean? You look at Nosferatu, the Robert Eggers film that came out 2 years ago. That was coming from a place where Robert Eggers was a fan of Dracula, was a fan of Nosferatu, and approached that property with that reverence. If you're approaching it without that reverence, without giving a shit, then you don't have room for a reinterpretation, in my opinion. Okay? I would never go and make a movie on something that I don't give a shit about and then change everything up. Because you have to kind of understand and you have to kind of give a shit about that character, about that property, if you're going to make changes and reinterpret it. Okay? People can point to Tim Burton's Batman and say like, well, Tim Burton was a comic book fan. Yeah, but you know what the man did? He kind of like read comic books about Batman. Okay? He understood the character. He tried to get inside the character's head and he distilled down an element of the character that was there, but just decided to amplify it within Tim Burton's world. Okay. So, that's kind of my take there. Now, this does lead me to asking a question, a kind of an overarching question of what the hell happened to Luc Besson? Seriously, like what the fuck happened? This was a talented filmmaker who made movies like The Fifth Element, who made movies like The Messenger, The Story of Joan of Arc, even The fucking Professional. These are all great movies that, are still viewed as towers in their genres with really complex characters and visually striking scenes and loads of action. I really love The Messenger, The Story of Joan of Arc with Mila Jovovich, and all of that style is here, but none of the substance, right? Like the substance isn't there in this film. It feels like we just got kind of the hollow shell. And so I got to ask, like, well, what's going on? What's going on with this filmmaker? And it does kind of lead credence to the whole idea of like, does an aging director kind of lose that ability to make films? They kind of, we brought up on this podcast multiple times of how certain directors, they reach a certain age and their quality of work really goes downhill. Now, I look at a filmmaker like Sam Raimi, who clearly that is not the case. You've seen Send Help, you know that he absolutely is still at the top of his game. So yeah, I got to ask the question, what the hell happened to Luc Besson? Now, with that said, I do want to get to some reviews. I don't have John with me to throw these off of, so we're going to react to them as we go. So let's look at review number 1. Now, some of these, I will warn you, some of them are bad and some of them are good. I tried to find a mixture of both. Let's just take a look. So first one, this is a weak movie for 90% of it. Honestly, don't waste your time. He clearly didn't give a fuck about Dracula to make an entire movie about it. Duh. As I talked about earlier, this guy literally just wanted to make a movie with Caleb Landry Jones. He didn't give a shit if it was Dracula or not. And it shows. I truly believe like this movie is a parody film. I don't think it's a real interpretation of Dracula. I think it's just someone said, hey, Dracula might be cool to make. Caleb Landry Jones is interested. Let's go do that. But I don't see this as a true interpretation of Dracula. I think it's a parody that pulls from far better films. And it's not even like it's not even something you could point to and say like, oh, well, that's homage. I'm like, no. It's not homage. This is just straight up plagiarism. Like it's straight up plagiarism. So let's go to review number 2. This is a long one. So do you think God will forgive us for loving each other so much? God is love. He understands. And if he doesn't, he can go to hell. Better than Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. Better than Del Toro's Frankenstein. Easily the best thing Luc Besson's made since The Fifth Element. Besson did what I thought Eggers was going to do, but Eggers played it safe with a faithful but boring adaptation. Besson makes Dracula his own with some wild swings that will probably drive story purists nuts. But for someone like me, someone who's never been super fond of the Dracula story, I really enjoyed and appreciated it. Caleb Landry Jones was freaking awesome. Christoph Waltz is always incredible. Drags slightly in the middle, but the climax more than makes up for it. This may be my new favorite version of the tale. Can also double as a pretty sweet early 2000s Axe body spray commercial. Yeah, I don't know if that's serious or if it is a joke review. I'm liable to go with the serious, like this is someone's actual opinion. So first off, let me go back to this for because there was something that was said in here that I just was like, I mean, I saw this, I was like, what the fuck? So first off, he says, better than Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. Fuck you. Okay, seriously, fuck you. This is nowhere near the level of Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, and complaining that Eggers' version was too safe. What version of the movie did you see? Because I didn't see that. I saw someone's version that was way stylized above anything else that we've ever seen before for that character. So yeah, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. 2, what else does it say here? Oh, easily the best thing Luc Besson's made since The Fifth Element. No. No. The Fifth Element had style. It had substance. It had interesting characters. It had comedy in places where it made sense. And it lived in a world that welcomed that. Like say what you want about The Fifth Element, but it very easily lend itself to that over-the-top, goofy humor. And it works for that time. This version of Dracula does not at all. Okay. So yeah, no, I'm sorry. I disagree 100% with this reviewer. They're fucking wrong. And yeah, the whole idea that they said like, oh, well, we're not really a big fan of Dracula. Well, then why are you watching a Dracula movie then? If you're not a fan, if you don't give a shit, then why are you watching this? Okay. Because if you don't want that, if you don't want a Dracula movie, go watch something else. There are other movies out there. But yeah, let's go to review number 3. They want to be Nosferatu so bad, but they just can't. LOL. Damn right. Fuck yeah, they can't. They try. I don't even think they're trying to be Nosferatu. I think it's just they're trying to be Bram Stoker's Dracula. They're trying to be Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. And they just can't. And I don't know why. I think it's just they thought, okay, well, if we just copy that but make it over the top and goofy, that oh yeah, that'll work. And literally rip off of 100% of what the story of that one was, which was love never dies. Okay. So yeah, no, they can't even be close to Nosferatu or Bram Stoker's Dracula. All right, let's go to our last review of the episode. Find yourself a man willing to wait for you for 400 years. And Christoph Waltz, God, I love you. Oh, Jesus. I'm sorry, guys. Like, first of all, the whole concept of this movie, and this review actually was one of like many that I kept seeing. The whole concept of Dracula waiting 400 years to that's literally every modern version of this story. Like you can trace it going all the way back to 1, the book, and 2, the versions from like the 70s with Jack Palance to Bram Stoker's Dracula I was talking about, the 92 version. Dark Prince, the USA TV movie, also goes into it. Like this is something that isn't new. The whole idea of Dracula being a love story, gothic romance, that's literally what it's always been. It's not new. The only difference is that you have a less talented director making a version of that. Like, seriously, you want a gothic horror romance about Dracula trying to find his wife for 400 years, go watch the 92 version. Seriously. It's far better. It's got the same concepts in it, but it's just done like 1,000 times better. Okay. Well, that's my thoughts on Dracula. That's these reviews honestly kind of pissed me off when I was watching them, because I'm like, there were too many people who were saying this was a good film. And I just kept thinking to myself, I'm like, have you never seen any other Dracula film? Because they all cover the same territory. It's not new. So, final thoughts. If you like this movie, great. Good job for you. I'm glad you liked it. Glad you got something out of it. I personally found this movie to be infuriating and boring at the same time. And yeah, that's the worst case to be. You know, I'm a Dracula fan. I am the person who would absolutely be lined up for a movie like this on day one. I've always been a Dracula fan. I've always been a fan of vampire films. And this one just was like a middle finger to people like me. At least I felt it was. But maybe this movie wasn't made for people like me. Maybe this movie was made for people who literally know nothing about Dracula and know nothing about, I don't know, good films, and know nothing about, you know, previous versions of this film. Maybe it was made for them. And if you got enjoyment out of it, great. But I didn't. And if you agree with me, well, we're in the same boat. We wasted 2 hours of our time that we're never going to get back. So, with that said, if you've liked this episode, please do me a favor and share it. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with your favorite Dracula fan who also is sulking in the corner having seen this movie and questioning themselves, why did someone like Luc Besson, who made The Fifth Element, make such a colossal turd? But if you want to, you can follow us on your favorite podcast app at cinemapsychoshow.com/follow. Click the link and boom, you're following us on all of your different apps. We have little buttons right there for Apple, Spotify, iHeart, you name it, we're there. And of course, if you're watching us here on YouTube, hey, please do me a favor and share this episode and like it and subscribe to us and drop us a comment. Let us know, what did you think of Dracula Love Tale? With that said, we'll see you next time.